Here's something that blew my mind when I first really understood it. You have been walking around your entire life believing that your brain is basically fixed, that you are who you are, that your habits are your habits, and that the older you get, the harder it becomes to change any of it. And I get why you believe that, because it mostly feels true. Trying to learn something new as an adult feels nothing like the effortless way children absorb language or social skills or movement. But here's what the science actually says. Your brain is not fixed. It is not a finished product. It is a living, malleable system that is capable of genuine, measurable change at any age, provided you understand the rules it operates by. And most people don't know those rules. Today, we're changing that. We're talking about neuroplasticity. You've probably heard the word thrown around in productivity circles or wellness content. It's become one of those buzzwords that gets applied to everything from meditation apps to corporate training programs, often without anyone actually explaining what it means or how it works. So let's start at the beginning and build from the ground up. Your brain is composed of roughly 86 billion neurons, nerve cells that communicate with each other through connection points called synapses. Neuroplasticity, at its core, is the process by which those connections are formed, strengthened, weakened, or eliminated in response to your experiences and behaviors. It's how you learn to walk, how you can recognize a friend's voice on the phone in half a second, and how a traumatic experience can shape your emotional responses for decades. The nervous system isn't just capable of this kind of change, it was built for it. Change is not a bug in the system. It's the entire point of having a nervous system in the first place. But here's where it gets critically important, and where most people's understanding of neuroplasticity goes completely sideways. There are two fundamentally different types of plasticity operating at different phases of life, and they work by entirely different rules. Mixing them up is why so many adults feel like they're failing at rewiring their brain when they follow advice that was really designed for a 7-year-old. From the time you're born until roughly your mid-20s, your brain is in a mode of developmental plasticity, and this mode is almost passive, meaning your nervous system changes simply through exposure. A child doesn't sit down and deliberately decide to learn language. They just exist in an environment where language is happening around them, and their brain absorbs it like a sponge absorbs water. That's because the young brain is overconnected. When you enter the world, you have an enormous number of neural connections, but they're crude and unrefined, like a city with thousands of small dirt roads and no highways. What development does is clear those dirt roads and build highways, strengthening the connections that get used while eliminating the ones that don't. From birth to age 25, your brain is primarily a pruning machine, refining its architecture based on your environment and experiences. The famous phrase in neuroscience is, neurons that fire together, wire together. In the developing brain, that statement is basically true. Co-activation equals connection. But once you cross that threshold into full adulthood, somewhere around 25, give or take a year, that automatic mode shuts off. And this is the part almost nobody tells you. The phrase, fire together, wire together, no longer applies the same way. Simply experiencing something repeatedly is no longer enough to change your adult brain. You can listen to the same podcast 100 times, read the same book in 20 different sittings, or spend years in the same job. And if a specific set of neurochemical conditions isn't present, your brain will not change. The experiences will wash over you. They won't stick. So what does it actually take to change the adult brain? This is where some genuinely beautiful research comes in. In the early 1990s, a graduate student named Greg Reckenzone, working in Michael Merzenich lab at UCSF, set out to challenge the then-dominant assumption that the adult brain was essentially fixed after a critical developmental window. What they demonstrated, across a series of careful, well-controlled experiments, changed how neuroscientists understand the brain entirely. In one of these studies, subjects sat at a table with a rotating drum in front of them that had tiny bumps arranged at varying distances from each other. They were asked to press a lever whenever they detected a change in the spacing of those bumps, a very subtle tactile discrimination task that required sustained, deliberate attention. As participants paid close attention to what their fingertips were feeling, the brain's map of those fingers, the region of the cortex devoted to processing touch information from those specific fingers, began to change. The map expanded. The representation got more detailed, more precise. Their fingers became measurably more sensitive at the neural level. But here's the control experiment that makes this finding extraordinary. In a separate condition, subjects touched the same drum and received the same sensory input to their fingertips, but their attention was directed elsewhere. They were told to listen for changes in an auditory tone playing in the background. And when researchers looked at the brain maps afterward, the touch map hadn't changed at all. The auditory map had shifted instead, reflecting where the attention had actually been directed. The input was the same. The brain change was completely different. The differentiating factor was attention. This tells us something profound about how adult neuroplasticity actually operates. It's not about what you're exposed to, it's about what you're focused on. The brain changes in response to the things you're paying precise, deliberate attention to, and it doesn't change for the things you're passively consuming, regardless of how much time you spend around them. If you've ever felt like you learned more from one intensely focused hour of studying than 5 distracted hours surrounded by the same material, now you know why. You weren't imagining it. You were experiencing the neurochemistry of attention in real time. So what's the actual mechanism? Why does focused attention trigger brain change when passive exposure doesn't? The answer comes down to 2 key neurochemicals that operate as gatekeepers of plasticity. The first is epinephrine, adrenaline. When you're in a state of genuine alertness, whether driven by curiosity, mild anxiety, competition, or anything else that raises your arousal level, your brainstem releases epinephrine throughout your brain. Think of this as the permission signal. It tells the brain, something important is happening right now. Without it, plasticity simply can't begin. No alertness, no change, full stop. But alertness alone is only the first gate. The second neurochemical is acetylcholine, and this one is released specifically in response to focused attention. Acetylcholine acts like a spotlight in the brain. When you narrow your attention onto a specific target, a piece of music you're trying to learn, a movement pattern you're trying to master, a concept you're trying to fully understand, acetylcholine gets released from 2 key areas of the brain and essentially amplifies the signal of whatever you're focused on relative to everything else competing for neural real estate. The signal-to-noise ratio improves dramatically. That specific input becomes neurologically privileged, and it's in that state, epinephrine plus acetylcholine, that synaptic changes actually become possible. Here's a practical angle on this that I think a lot of people miss. Your visual system is directly linked to your ability to generate these neurochemical conditions. When your eyes are relaxed and scanning broadly, the kind of lazy, unfocused gaze you have when staring at the wall or scrolling mindlessly, your brain is in a dispersed, low-attention state. When your eyes converge slightly inward on a specific target and you hold that visual focus, neurons in your brainstem trigger the release of both epinephrine and acetylcholine almost automatically. This is why narrowing your visual field is one of the most direct behavioral tools available for sharpening mental focus. You're not just seeing something more clearly, you're activating the neurochemical conditions for learning. This has real implications for how you structure your day. The periods when you're naturally most alert, which for most people tend to cluster in the first several hours after waking, are your highest value windows for deliberate learning. Research now shows that neuroplasticity continues throughout the lifespan, supporting learning, memory, and recovery from injury or disease. But that capacity is not uniformly available across all hours. The epinephrine system is most naturally primed at particular points in your daily cycle. If you're spending that window scrolling social media or sitting in unfocused meetings, you are burning neurochemical fuel that could be powering actual change. And if we're being honest with each other, the smartphone has become one of the most effective plasticity suppressors most of us carry in our pockets. The reason phones are so easy to pay attention to isn't random, it's by design. The small screen size naturally restricts your visual field, which creates a cone of attention. Motion content pulls the visual system reflexively, and the constant novelty hits the dopamine system in ways that consume the very neurochemical resources you need for meaningful learning. None of this means screens are inherently harmful, but it does mean you need to be deliberate about when you give those resources away for passive consumption versus directing them towards something that will genuinely change you. How long should a focused learning session actually be? The research points consistently toward 90-minute windows, what's sometimes called an ultradian cycle. Within that window, expect the first 5 to 10 minutes to feel rough. Your attention is warming up. The most productive focus tends to come in the middle stretch, and you should plan for it to taper near the end. This is normal. This is biology. Don't interpret the warm-up struggle as a sign that you're doing it wrong. In fact, feeling a mild edge of discomfort during focused learning, that slight friction of staying on task when your attention wants to drift, is actually a reliable sign that the epinephrine system is engaged and you're in the right state for change. After that 90-minute bout, here's what most high performers instinctively do, and most productivity advice gets wrong. They disengage. They go for a walk without headphones. They sit quietly. They let their mind wander without structure. This isn't laziness. It's neuroscience. Research published in Cell Reports found that a brief period of quiet rest or a short nap immediately after learning a challenging task produced significantly better retention and integration of that material than simply moving on to the next thing. The brain needs a window of reduced input to begin marking those recently active synapses for long-term consolidation. Filling every gap between learning sessions with more stimulation, more podcasts, more notifications, more content, interrupts this process. And of course, sleep is where the actual rewiring happens. The focused learning session during the day is the trigger. It creates a neurochemical marking at specific synapses, essentially flagging them with the biological equivalent of a sticky note that says, "Strengthen this connection." But the restructuring itself, the actual long-term potentiation, the permanent shift in how those neurons communicate, happens during deep sleep. This is why pulling all-nighters to cram information is such a spectacularly poor strategy. You might hold the material in working memory through the night, but without the sleep that follows, the changes never get written into the hardware. You wake up and it's gone. What does this mean practically if you want to actually use neuroplasticity to change something in your life? Whether that's a physical skill, a new language, a different emotional response pattern, or a new cognitive capability. It means getting clear on what exactly you want to change. That clarity itself is step one, not just philosophically, but neurologically. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain involved in planning, self-awareness, and executive function, signals to the rest of the nervous system that a particular input or behavior is worth tagging as significant. Without that explicit orientation, the brain has no reason to treat your experience as anything other than background noise. Then you structure your engagement. Alertness first, focus second, rest third, sleep fourth. Alertness through whatever works for you. A good night of sleep, hydration, caffeine if it's in your routine, or simply the motivating weight of a goal that genuinely matters to you. Fear works, love works, competitive drive works. From a chemistry standpoint, the nervous system doesn't distinguish between them. They all produce epinephrine. Then, you deploy your attention deliberately onto the specific thing you want to learn, using your visual focus as the anchor if you're a sighted person, and you hold that focus for as long as you can while bringing it back each time it drifts. Then you rest, then you sleep. One thing I want to emphasize, because it tends to create a lot of unnecessary anxiety. You don't need to perfect every session. The brain is more forgiving than the optimization culture around productivity would have you believe. Missing a session, having a distracted day, getting less sleep than ideal one night, none of these erase progress. The neurochemical markers at those synapses don't vanish overnight. What matters is the pattern over time. Consistency across weeks and months produces change that sticks, even if individual sessions feel imperfect. There's also an aspect of plasticity that works through a completely different mechanism, one built less on intense focus and more on repetition combined with reward. This is the dopamine-driven loop that underlies habit formation and skill automatization. When you repeat a behavior and it's followed by something that releases dopamine, a sense of completion, a small win, positive feedback, those circuits get reinforced in a way that makes the behavior progressively more automatic over time. This is how you move something from effortful to reflexive. The first time you try a new movement pattern in the gym or a new chord progression on the guitar, it demands intense conscious attention. After hundreds of repetitions paired with positive feedback, it becomes something your nervous system does without much overhead. That's plasticity working in slow motion, and it's just as real and powerful as the high-focus learning bouts. The big takeaway here is this: your brain is not a library where knowledge just gets stored on shelves. It's more like a city that is constantly under renovation, tearing down unused roads, widening the highways that get heavy traffic, building new infrastructure where demand is highest. The city does not renovate itself randomly. It renovates in response to the signals you give it. And the most powerful signal you can give it is focused, deliberate, alert attention, followed by rest and sleep to let the construction crews do their work. This is your challenge for the week. Pick one thing you've been trying to learn or change and design one deliberate 90-minute session around it. Eliminate visual distractions, narrow your focus, accept the discomfort of the warm-up, and then follow it with 20 minutes of genuine, unstimulated rest. No podcast, no phone, no music, just quiet. Do that 3 times this week and notice what happens to how that material feels by the end of it. And here's what I want to know from you. What's the one thing you've always wanted to learn but convinced yourself it's too late for? Drop it in the comments below, because based on everything we just covered today, chances are it isn't too late. It just requires a different approach than the one you've been trying. Growth is not accidental, it's intentional. If you're ready to build a better version of yourself, welcome. Stay tuned.